After my father passed away, I needed a change of scenery, so I took a job as the caretaker of an isolated lodge deep in the woods. It was a summer retreat that had been closed for the off-season, and my job was to maintain the property until the next year. The isolation was exactly what I needed, or so I thought. The lodge was a massive, creaking structure, built decades ago and largely untouched by time. It had that rustic charm with a touch of something unsettling, like the feeling you get when someone's watching you, even though you know you're alone. The first few weeks were quiet, just as I hoped. I spent my days clearing the trails, repairing the fence, and keeping the place tidy. At night, I would sit by the fire, listening to the distant calls of owls and the rustling of the trees in the wind. The forest had a life of its own, and it was easy to get lost in its rhythms. Then one night, something changed. It started with the wind, or rather, the absence of it. The trees outside had always swayed gently, but now they stood unnaturally still, as if holding their breath. The silence was so profound that it was suffocating. I was sitting by the fire reading an old book I found in the lodge's library when I heard a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a knock at the door. I froze, my heart pounding. The lodge was miles from the nearest town, and no one was supposed to be here. I listened closely, hoping it was just a branch tapping against the wood. But then it came again. 3 deliberate knocks, slow and measured. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, and approached the door. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. For a moment, I considered grabbing the old hunting rifle mounted on the wall, but I dismissed the thought. It was probably just some lost hiker, I told myself. When I opened the door, there was nothing but darkness. The forest loomed, its shadowy branches intertwining like fingers reaching out. I stepped outside, my breath visible in the cold night air, and scanned the surroundings. There was no one there, just the silence and the oppressive stillness of the woods. As I turned to go back inside, I noticed something on the ground, a small, crudely carved figure, half buried in the dirt. It was a strange little effigy, made of twigs and string, resembling a man with twisted limbs. I picked it up, feeling a sudden wave of unease wash over me. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, the figure sitting on the nightstand, its hollow eyes staring into nothingness. I told myself it was just a prank, kids from the town maybe. But deep down, I knew it was something more. The lodge felt different now, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The next day, I found more of the figures. They were scattered around the property, one hanging from a tree, another placed on the windowsill of the lodge, and yet another tucked inside my tool shed. Each one was slightly different, but they all had that same unsettling, twisted appearance. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me, though I could never see anyone. The forest had become a living, breathing entity, filled with secrets and unseen dangers. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the knock again. This time it was louder, more insistent. My heart raced as I grabbed the rifle and slowly crept towards the door. But before I could reach it, the knocking stopped, replaced by a low, guttural whisper coming from outside my window. I turned toward the sound, my hands shaking as I raised the rifle. Through the curtains, I could see a figure standing just beyond the glass. It was tall and gaunt, its body barely visible in the dim light of the moon. But what truly terrified me were its eyes, 2 hollow, empty voids that seemed to suck in all the light around them. I stood there, paralyzed by fear, as the figure slowly raised a hand and pointed at me. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, like a chant in a language I couldn't understand. My instincts screamed at me to run, to leave the lodge and never look back, but my feet were rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the figure vanished, as if swallowed by the night. The whispering stopped, and the oppressive silence returned. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of the room, the rifle clutched in my hands, my eyes fixed on the door. The next morning, I found the last figure, larger than the others, with its limbs twisted into unnatural angles, sitting on the doorstep. It was accompanied by a new sound, one that sent chills down my spine. The distant echo of laughter, carried by the wind. I left that day, abandoning the lodge and the job without a second thought. I didn't care about the consequences. I just wanted to get as far away from that place as possible. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that lodge. I've tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down, I know better. Something was there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. And as I drive away, I can still feel those hollow eyes watching, waiting for the next soul to wander into their grasp.